Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Get in the Garage. I am your host, Mike. With me, as always,
is Luke.
Welcome. Thank you for listening once again. Today, we will be covering Slowhand himself,
Eric Clapton.
Mr. Eric Clapton.
The woman tone.
The woman tone, the
fool.
the fool, the fool. I don't know. I'll have to say that Eric Clapton, top 3 favorite guitar players of all time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, for me anyway. That's not everybody.
I definitely don't think it's me, but
yeah, right. Of course. But I think for me, because he was very much influential on my playing, and most specifically like the John Mayall and the Blues Breakers album, also known as the Beano album. For me, I would say that, okay, the style in which he plays was very influential, but it was a game changer in terms of what I thought was good tone.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know, especially towards like more so in the beginning of my musical career, if you want to call it that, it was very much, you know, like the mid 2000s and like, you know, the Line 6 Spider or whatever was like hot.
Let me tell you about Mike. When I met Mike was like, it's a solid state amp was fine. And I was like, no, man, tubes.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? You're crazy. And I was like, no. You gotta play tubes.
Yeah. And once I plugged into a tube amp.
Down the rabbit hole Mike went.
Yep. Never looked back, you know. Yeah. And Clapton, very much known for his tone. So let's start out. You know, Clapton, young man, England, right? He had a really weird, like, rough childhood. Long story short, was his mother was his grandmother and his sister was his mother.
Yeah, and that's how he was raised.
Right, and he was what then they would call maybe like a bastard child, which is basically like his mother had like a one-night fling with a man who was in the military. She got pregnant. In terms of like what that meant in relation to her society-wise or whatever, that's obviously, especially back then, that was something to kind of be ashamed of, right? So she kind of wanted nothing to do with him. She had him. So then she bounces and leaves Eric with his grandparents.
Right.
And they basically raise him. And then he finds out a little bit later on, obviously, you know, what the truth is and all that. And then he was rejected by his mother, his biological mother, you know. And I think that that kind of a trauma
was like a driving force.
Absolutely.
Like you see that kind of deal with like John Lennon too.
Yeah.
Where like John Lennon was kind of raised by his grandmother or I think his aunt. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, his mom was kind of like in and out at times.
Yeah.
And it ended up kind of in a way like being the driving factor.
Yeah.
If you look into a lot of it, most musicians have some kind of like a mother trauma in their life. A lot of them do.
Yeah.
There's like a staggering number. I think like Tom Petty, mom died at when he was younger, and then like it always seems to like be that kind of like driving thing in some of these people's lives.
And I think with Eric Clapton specifically, you know, rock and roll obviously was around, right? In the form of the Elvises and the Little Richards and stuff like that, you know. But I think where Clapton took like a hard turn was that I think where rock and roll tends to be kind of like, let's forget about our problems and have a good time and do the twist. Blues was very much confronting that kind of like real heaviness quality that life has. And maybe because of his early childhood traumas that sort of heaviness to things really resonated with him. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So
yeah, that brings him to playing guitar, right? And like the first thing he's ever played on is 5 Live Yardbirds. So like that album is pretty, like it goes unnoticed at the time, but I mean retrospectively it's so influential.
Oh yeah.
And like me and Mike were like talking beforehand too, like this was kind of like a little scene that was going on. It wasn't like getting like super noticed, but in that scene, Eric Clapton was like the king guitar player. Like, like these people had not heard somebody play like this before.
Yeah.
But like, if you think about like the Beatles are around, right?
Yeah.
You have like George Harrison playing, you know, his kind of soloing, which is kind of more like Carl Perkinsy like influenced, where like Clapton's coming out, he's playing blues licks like hard.
Yeah, he's definitely like
the
BB King,
right.
the Muddy Waters, like that's where Clapton's coming out of.
Also, Five Live Yardbirds too, all American R&B and blues songs, which is pretty impressive. Like the whole thing. So that was like their whole vibe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Clapton was like what you would say like a purist, right? I mean, like as like kids tend to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I from what I have seen, he was incredibly stubborn in that way, which would end up being like the reason why he would eventually leave the Yardbirds when For Your Love comes out, because he's like, that's way too pop. I'm not doing that. Like that's
right.
like mainstream radio stuff. Like I'm trying to play like BB King.
Right. And For Your Love, I think is like 65. Five Live, I think is 64. And yeah, Five Live, like I'm holding the record right now. I don't have an original copy. I wish, guys. I have a Charlie Records repress, which is it's pretty garbage.
I'm over here like, oh, that's nice.
No, it's pretty garbage. Yeah. But yeah, so Five Live, it's all. I mean, you got Muddy Waters, I'm a Man. Smokestack Lightning's on here. Too Much Monkey
Howlin'
Business.
Wolf, man.
Yeah, so you're getting a lot of Chicago kind of stuff. And it's just his guitar playing is like.
It's up to par, man.
The tone. He's got great licks. Like the Yardbirds took like that music and like did like the rave up.
Right.
Like they kind of invented that garage rock rave up thing.
Yeah.
Of like doing like putting on the double time and like raving up a solo.
Right.
To extend the song.
Yeah.
Like that was like the first like in like like white boy rock and roll to like start like extending the song.
Yeah.
And Clapton was on the forefront of that with Cream, in rock and roll.
Absolutely.
To do like the long improvisation.
Yeah.
And that like starts right here on his first recording.
Yeah, and you can hear like I think especially with
did you also
Five Live.
Did you see how he's credited on the album, Michael?
No, I didn't. What lead guitar? Oh, Eric Slowhand Clapton.
Yeah, like you want to tell that story because like you.
Yeah, so for the longest time, I thought, okay, this is how like silly it was for me. Like obviously, growing up, like you know who Eric Clapton is. Like if you haven't heard "Wonderful Tonight," I don't know what you must have been living under a rock. You know what I'm saying? Like or at the very, or yeah, you know what I mean? Or at like least like Layla, or like at least the Eric Clapton unplugged version of Layla. At the very least, the slower or whatever. But yeah, so I thought initially, because in my my early adolescent guitar player heavy metal heavy brain, I'm just like, this is a snooze fest, man, like and I thought that's why they call him Slowhand, because he just plays slow. I didn't know, and I didn't do the research, and back then, you know what I mean, I was way more concerned with like other, I was concerned with what Shadows Fall was doing, not what Eric Clapton was doing.
You're like, you see that Dimebag guitar?
Yeah, right, absolutely. So but yeah, as it turns out, Slowhand, the nickname for Slowhand comes from so when Eric Clapton would break a guitar string,
because they would do these like rave ups in double time, which is like the really fast like scratching on the guitars.
Absolutely. And whenever he would break a string, instead of like I mean, I don't even think he had a guitar tech at the time anyway, but you know what I'm saying, like instead of having like another guitar like at the ready in case he broke a string, he would just change the string in the middle of the show. Like just hold up the set so he could change a string. But people loved him so much, and he was so much like the star, that they would just start like slow clapping for him until he would finish mending the broken string or whatever, and then they would kick into the next song, But it's weird because like if someone was to do that now, like if I went to a show now, right, and somebody broke a string and then they like literally just stood up, that you'd think, look at this pretentious.
Oh no, I've seen it been done in quite a few cool manners before.
Have you? Yeah,
I have. Like I've been to many a show where this has happened, and like it just like. It makes it like it makes it better. Like you like end up like rooting for them. You're like, yeah, like how are you gonna get out of it? Like,
yeah. No, I see that though. I see that. But yeah, so at the time, Clapton, to get a little maybe like guitar nerdish or whatever, at the time, Clapton is running through a very, very classic kind of setup that you would see at the time. The Beatles were doing the same thing. You get the Vox AC30, and then the guitar that you would have was usually maybe like an early Gretsch model, or like a Jazzmaster, or like a Telecaster. And that's where I think that his guitar tone in this very much has that super bright, shimmery, kind of glassy sound that an AC30 would give you, which is interesting because
they're pushing it too. It's like that garage rock. It's right in the edges. Like
you feel it in the fillings. Some of those solos
like
are
in
like,
your teeth.
ugh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what's funny is that this is when Clapton becomes Clapton, in the sense that there's a reputation.
Yeah,
there's
is
talk
like,
of Clapton in the
this is also
shadows.
the Clapton is God. That's around the Yardbirds time as well.
Yeah,
when that's like spray painted on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was like a scene, because like the Yardbirds were really trying to bring, like, the mission statement was authentic American R&B music.
Right.
And that's what they were like trying to do, like rhythm and blues. And they were like one of the first UK bands, or like London bands, to like be doing it.
Right.
And so like they like created a big following, and like a scene like really evolved around that.
Yeah.
Out of that, in the love for, Northern soul and all that. I think that was all brewing, but like the Yardbirds were like bringing it home, because also they were like backing like Sonny Boy Williamson, because that record is released later once Clapton is famous with Cream. That record came out where they backed Sonny Boy. I think it's Sonny Boy, right?
Yeah, it's Sonny Boy.
Yeah,
it's Yardbirds with Sonny Boy Williams.
Yeah, that has Clapton on it, and like they were really, that's what they were going for, and like they were bringing that vibe, and they kind of created the scene, and they were kings of that scene because Clapton was like the most proficient guitar player.
Right.
And if we're like talking too, man, like who was like the first guitar hero in like the rock and roll, like blues rock kind of deal?
Oh, it has to be
Clapton. The myth is Clapton is God, and so everybody that comes after him is like, well, I got, like I think it's all born, and it's that scene too, and like where it's like Hendrix comes over, and then Hendrix is the best, and then this guy plays, no, he's the best, and like you have Townsend smashing his guitar, and like but they're all in that like same London-y scene, and like it's that competition, and Jeff Beck, and
they're all trying to outdo each other. That's what I think that like just as the Beatles became the standard for like basically, at the very least in the United States, like every kid who like kind of like dug music and like rock music or whatever, just like, in other words, just as much as the Beatles were that baseline, that for guitar players it was Clapton. Clapton was like the goal. You're like, I need to play something like that. Because, jumping ahead just a touch, but like if you listen to one of the albums, the Primal Solos album,
okay,
that was actually, this kind of like moves the narrative on here anyway. But
so like Clapton leaves after, like we stated, For Your Love. Like the next Yardbirds, like the Yardbirds like start taking off, right? And so they get like more managed. And as they're getting more managed, they come in and they're like, all right, we got this song for you. It's got, it's like, I would say it's got like Eastern influence, right? Like, For Your Love's like definitely, because it's got like the congas and like the.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's got harpsichord too.
Right.
Where that's something where
I love this song. This song is, I feel like this song is highly influential.
Absolutely.
It's like, on the edge of quasi psychedelic. It definitely, for a pop song, it's like psychedelic. Right. It's I love this song. I think it's super innovative, awesome. Anyway, but Clapton hears that and he's like, that's not the blues. I'm out.
Yeah.
So he goes with the next best blues band on the market at the time, who's playing American R&B blues.
Yeah.
And that's John Mayall.
Yeah.
So when he moves on, he originally joins John Mayall. John Mayall had released one live album before Clapton came in. I don't really know who's the guitar player on that, but the lineup right after is, this would be 1966. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because 65, 66, because Clapton leaves the Yardbirds in 65.
Yeah, in 65. And then this is like these live dates here, April 66. So he's with John Mayall for like a short period, but and like this lineup has originally had John Mayall Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I posted this album the other day on my Instagram, and I said like proto Cream. So that this is where like Cream comes in because Jack Bruce is on here. But yeah, this is like a London Records collector series called John Mayall Primal Solos.
Mm-hmm.
Seek it out, because I mean, if you're like a Clapton head, this album is super cool because it's got Jack Bruce, and I think Jack Bruce is playing like this 6-string baritone guitar, which is just like crazy
the weird
cool sounding
Fender, baritone.
Yeah, and then the B-side's the Mick Taylor Band from '68. But
And I
me
found
and
that
Mike,
to be very underwhelming.
yeah, the first time I listened to this when I bought it, I thought it was garbage too, and I'm only in it for that like little Clapton set on
Let
here.
me just
but
say, if you,
the Clapton set is really cool. It lines
it
up.
makes it work. To me, the Clapton set makes it justifiable to buy this record.
Yeah, and this record's
And
only
you're-
like a couple bucks.
That's what I mean. You're
It's
not gonna
not like a rare record.
Yeah, you're not gonna pay like $20 for this album. You know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
gonna $5-6 at like your local record store. Shout out to Mystic Disc.
Yeah, Mystic Disc. Go to
That's where I
Mystic
got
Disc.
mine.
Yeah, that's where I got mine too. So yeah, John Mayall, Primal Solos. It has it's a cool like timeline between, if you're into Clapton, you listen to 5 Live Yardbirds, and then you get to listen to that, and that's like a little bit later, maybe like a year later, I think. A year and a half, 2 years, whatever. And it's you hear it's playing like a little different. It's more like expressive, and like he's got more blues licks down. It's he's like listening to more B.B. King, probably, all this stuff. All these different guitar players, and you really hear where it's coming in. And Jack Bruce is on here. It's a really cool little set.
But you can even hear, like, okay, on side 2, there's kind of the first 2 tunes where it's like it's a pretty big band. It's where John Mayall starts introducing like a horn section and all that stuff. The last track on that is just a 4-piece band. It's John Mayall, Mick Taylor. I don't know who's on bass. The last track, I don't think it's any. I mean,
Steve Thompson.
Steve. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know who that is.
Shout out to Steve.
Scuba Steve. But you, even in that though, you can absolutely hear the Eric Clapton influence on Mick Taylor's playing,
right.
Because Mick Taylor, again, he's got the Sunburst Les Paul, and at this point too, let's also talk about the guitar tone and how it changes with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. So now
on the back cover here too, you have Eric Clapton playing a Les Paul, and you have a picture of Mick Taylor playing a Les Paul.
Les Paul, yeah. Mick Taylor's Les Paul's dope though. It's got the Bigsby like trem on the butt end of it. I love those things. I just think it functionally they suck, but like they just look so cool. It's almost worth dealing with it. So Clapton now comes from the like I said, like the more Beatles setup, which is like maybe like a Fender or a Gretsch guitar running through a Vox AC30. The new, well, not the new, but in the sense to where within the musical community, it's the Les Paul. The Les Paul is like the guitar, it's all about the tone. You're not getting that thin sort of bright glassy tone that you're getting from a single coil pickup, which is offered by a Fender guitar. And the Gretsch I think it's technically a humbucker, but it's voiced very much, it's a lot brighter voiced. Anyway, so Clapton picks up they don't know exactly what year it was, but assume that it was a 1960 Gibson Les Paul Standard. For my guitar heads out there, the way that is that 1960 is where they introduced the 1960s slim tapered neck, which changes the feel of the guitar pretty dramatically in comparison to the 1950s guitars, where the necks have been referred to as like baseball bats. They're very, very thick. So he gets the Gibson, and then he, at the same time, Jim Marshall created Marshall amps, and I think didn't he create wasn't the first Marshall amp created for
The Who, right?
Yeah,
I think
for Pete Townsend, because Pete Townsend was like, I need something louder, like build me something that's louder.
Yeah, he was trying to make like that sheets of sound kind of thing.
Yeah. So
the windmills.
So Clapton would eventually upgrade to the to like the big guitar stack that you would like iconically see him standing in front of in like the Cream farewell at the Royal Albert Hall. And then obviously, I mean, at that point everybody had like the Marshall Plexis, which was like the giant, stack, like Hendrix. You can see Hendrix standing in front of like 2 stacks of these Marshalls and stuff. But this was a bit more downplayed, where it was the Marshall. It's called the Marshall. It's called the Blue Bluesbreaker amp because Eric Clapton used this amp on the Bluesbreaker album. I
Right,
mean, the amp is named after the album where it's like iconically featured as the guitar amp. So that's how you know it was a groundbreaking album.
Yeah, so this is so it's John Mayall with Eric Clapton, also known as the Beano album, because Eric Clapton is disinterestedly looking at the children's comic book Beano on the front cover. And this album is like the most influential British blues album of probably all time.
I mean, if you go,
because I mean it's pretty up there. It's like Eric Clapton is like almost like inventing like the lick on the electric guitar, the way like most players are. Like the people who are influenced from this record is like it's amazing. And like we were talking that Primal Solos, like this is recorded like at the same time, so it's like the same era of Clapton. And so it's a really great companion piece to it, which is why like I highly recommend it if you're into the Beano album.
I mean, talk about influential, right? Any guitar modeling amp or option always has a clean channel, has a, whatever, like a distorted channel, whatever. Almost always, 9 times out of 10, there is a British tone programmed in there, like Brit rock or Brit blues or Brit something, and it's literally modeled after that exact Eric Clapton tone.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't speak volumes to how influential this was, not only with guitar players who would come afterwards, but just in the sense that it's just kind of like it's ingrained in the guitar culture.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And so out of like this too, you're getting like Eric Clapton coming out of it. But also on the side note, you get John McVie on bass,
which
on the Bluesbreakers album. So like, if you think of like how the Yardbirds birthed, Eric Clapton and the Bluesbreakers into, you have John McVie on bass, and then you get Fleetwood Mac formed, and then like all these musicians formed out of these bands, and it's like the legacy, especially the Bluesbreakers album, of like having John Mayall, and then Alpha John Mayall would form all these other great bands like Fleetwood Mac and Cream, and
and if you
Mick Taylor leaving the Rolling Stones, and even the Yardbirds having Eric Clapton, then Jeff Beck, then Jimmy Page, like these two, the Yardbirds and John Mayall, would birth almost every other like successful like British blues band to some extent. Like they're all connected into like that family tree that's rooted from these two bands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say the only guitar player who might be excluded from that would be Pete Townsend.
Yeah,
but it's like the Who were still kicking ass anyway. It's not like the Who weren't kicking ass. You know what I mean? Like they didn't need to. They were just a great band from the jump. So, but that's what's interesting.
But even to that point, man, like even to that point, you still have the connection from Jeff Beck's Truth album. You have Keith Moon and supposed to play on that, so you know what I mean. It's still like intertwined, and all those bands existed together,
and they were all pals too.
They
were
the
all
Stones and the Who were like best friends. It's like that kind of deal too. It's like even the camaraderie, like they all play on all those records together.
Yeah,
and
but that's what shows you though. It's like all the great musical movements seem to be birthed out of like a community of musicians who all like come together and be like, all right, we're all gonna try to do this thing.
Definitely. And so the Beano album, like I mean, Mike, this is like one of Mike's favorite records of all time.
Easy top 5 favorite albums of all time.
Like he got to play out with one of those, like a reproduction of that amp, and like he wouldn't shut up about it for like years.
It was amazing.
Yeah, like
it was amazing. it was like I played the owner of it, good friend of ours. Shout out to Bob. But he also had I think it was a 77 Les Paul. So like plugging a 77 Les Paul into like a tube screamer type pedal into the Bluesbreaker amp was just like it was like the clouds parted and like the heavens opened up, because it's like that's like my bucket list tone, man. That's the amp that I at some point in my life I want to own that amp. Like it's because it's amazing. Anyway, I'm rambling on about my self-indulgence.
The Beano album is great. What songs on here would you like shout out as a guitar player where you're just like, yeah, these are my jams? Or not even as a guitar player, just like ones that you love.
I mean, Parchment Farm is badass, even though that's like that features heavily John Mayall playing harmonica,
Right.
But I mean,
What's the first song on side 2? I think that one's
Key to
like,
Love.
Oh my, that one's
Down, 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 down,
Yeah,
down,
yeah,
down,
yeah.
down, down, down. Oh yeah, it's. I mean,
Yep, I love that.
Stepping Out's great. I mean, look, this is one of the albums, and the thing is that they're so.
And these became
songs are
standards,
so,
like,
yeah.
and it's, you know what I mean. Like originally, like the artists that do these songs are, you know, amazing and great, and you should look back on them. But like I'm talking like for British white boy blues, like this album became everybody did these songs after.
Well, and I think what's unique about this in comparison to maybe like the Yardbirds, where the Yardbirds did do original music that was very influential. What you see here is you see Mayall really trying to kind of pave a way in terms of being like, oh, like I can also be a blues songwriter. In other words, I don't have to keep covering Willie Dixon songs.
Right.
I don't have to keep covering Muddy Waters songs, whatever. Like we can write our own blues. You know what I mean? And I think, and like I said, all these, I mean, this album is so accessible in that way too, where it's like every song is pretty much under okay, Have You Heard is 5 minutes and 55 seconds. That's the longest cut on the album. But the shortest cut on the album is 1 minute and 45. And everything else ranges around like the 2 minute mark. So I'm just saying, like, it's like
The Beano album, check it out.
It's just so good.
The playing
it's
is
amazing.
great. It's really where Clapton is like first. You know, I don't know.
I think this is where Clapton
has his own personality.
Yeah,
really
and
like,
and it just added to the whole kind of like mythos, right? Myth of what Eric Clapton was and who he was and all that stuff, and it would kind of come to fruition in a way where he would become part of. And I thought about this too, man. Okay, they in a way kind of gave birth to the power trio in the rock setting, right? Cream, but also they were like one of the first like super groups. Like I was thinking in my mind of like super groups, you know, because that's kind of a thing. I remember in like the 2000s there was a Chicken Foot, like that's a super group. It's like
Oh
Sammy
my God.
Hagar, Joe Satriani, you know, whatever. But
Yeah.
what I mean to say is it's just kind of like, well, here you have Eric Clapton, who people are literally spray painting Clapton is God on like defacing public property, and then you have Jack Bruce, monster bass player,
formerly of Manfred Mann.
formerly of Manfred Mann, you know, and then you have Ginger Baker,
Like
who is formerly of Manfred Mann, but
they were also in the Graham Bond organization.
yeah, Graham Bond, yeah.
Yep. So like Graham Bond was like more of a jazzy outfit,
Mm-hmm.
and they would play like jazz songs, jazz covers, blues. I think Graham Bond was played. I think Graham Bond was saxophonist, keys player. I'm not too sure on that one.
Oh, I think he's.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I definitely have like I have like a Warner Brothers like Green Label album upstairs that has Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. It has like every era of the Graham Bond organization on it. But yeah, they were like kicking around too at the same time, but they were like much more jazz based.
Yeah, and that's where Jack Bruce, he kind of cut his teeth as a bass player on an upright bass.
Yeah,
because he was more of a purist, really.
And Ginger Baker was more playing jazz drums.
Heavy influence.
Yeah, so
by
he was
jazz
like
drums.
playing jazz.
Yeah.
And they come in to Cream through more playing like through Manfred Mann, and then maybe more playing like the blues kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, they all find themselves bandless at one point. And Clapton really, from Jack Bruce playing with John Mayall,
Yep.
like we talked about in that Primal Solos record, and they knew each other, so they all form a band together.
Right.
And that band is Cream, and they call themselves Cream because they were the
Cream of the crop.
cream of the crop. It's like
Yeah.
so cocky, but it's so true.
I mean, it absolutely is. And
So Fresh Cream is what, 66?
I
I believe so.
think so.
No, it's 67.
67.
That's what it says on the back of this record here.
Okay.
We'll get the official.
Yeah, we'll get the fish. But yeah, so 67, Fresh Cream comes out, and like, I don't know, man. This album just plays so good to me. Like, I love I Feel Free, what else is on here? Yeah, I'm So Glad. I mean that, and they do like Rolling and Tumbling.
Toad's on there too, right? The drum solo.
Yeah. But even the liner notes, it all started 4 months ago as rumors. It seemed hard to believe that three such musical giants as Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and Jack Bruce could be joining together. Soon it became reality. Cream were formed, and here they are. This album is made up of pure, fresh cream. Digest and enjoy it. But do not worry too much. There is a lot more where this has come from.
Yeah, it was December 66 in the UK.
December 66 was the UK release?
Yes, that is correct. And then it's probably in America in 60. I mean, because if it's
yeah. Also,
December, it's end of the year, so probably in America you got it in 67. But
for people
like, let's just talk. Like, I mean, I listened to this album the other day. Like, if this is 67, they entered in. They pretty much took psychedelic, culture.
Yeah.
And influence, and I mean, at least Eric Clapton's guitar solo at the beginning of in the middle of I Feel Free is so like groundbreaking for like the psychedelic solo. I feel like he was just like, this is what a psychedelic rock solo sounds like. Like, it's so, it's just, I can't think of anything else that sounds like as amazing as that solo.
Yeah, it's just,
it's like the, it's like hangs in the air. It's got like a whole different feel than like,
well, in comparison to like the blues break, like the Beano album.
Yeah,
you're like, oh, this is kind of a new, different sort of Clapton.
Yeah, and it's like, it's the blues. As like I've heard them like reference it like the blues with polka dots. It's like what he was like saying, you know, and like, I mean, for me, I love I remember the first time I listened to this record. I found it. Somebody gave me a box of like moldy ass records.
Yeah,
but like,
isn't that how the story always goes?
Yeah, so someone's like, "Yeah, you like records," and they drop them off, and then now I have a box. This was when I was in high school, so I had a box of like moldy psychedelic records. But I knew they were psych looking because the covers, and I was like, okay, so some of these might be cool, and there was Hendrix in there. And so I like took them out, and they were all damaged, like the water damaged. But I cleaned them off, and they were like okay enough ish to listen to. And like one of them was Fresh Cream, and I remember I put it on, and it was mind blowing. I mean, NSU Sleepy Time, which is like one of my favorite Cream songs of all time. I don't know why, but yeah, man, like there's so many cool songs on here. I mean, like driving in my car, smoking my cigar. Like I just love all that. All the drums on here are so innovative.
Yeah.
Like as rock drumming, that's like the first heavy rock drumming I can like think of from that like time period. Like Mike said, from the Beano album to this, it's just like so much style was put into it, and like
absolutely,
it was like psychedelic blues. And like what I like about side one is more of their personal statement, whereas side two is more of like, I mean, at least on the US version, I think the UK one might be a little bit different. But like, yeah, and then like side B, it's really more of like traditional songs. You got like their take on Rolling and Tumbling, For Until Late, Cat Squirrel.
Yeah.
But and then I'm So Glad, the Skip James song, and then you know Toad is just a drum solo, like you know what I mean. But yeah, so side two you kind of get like the classic blues through the Cream psychedelic filter, and then and then side one is mostly them writing psychedelic songs through the blues filter, which is like, it's like almost like yin and yang, backwards, forwards kind of thing. And I really enjoyed that. I kind of picked up on that like this year when I was like listening to this record, and I was like, oh, that's kind of what they did. It's all, And
it's interesting how like he left the Yardbirds because they were not so purist blues to go to a purist blues band, and then just to go back to something that was a bit more experimental. He kind of like needed, it's just interesting how things played out. It was like he needed to do like the blues purist album in order to like unlock like the next level for himself, kind of thing. Like which was to be like, okay, now let's explore.
The way I kind of see it is like he sometimes like it looks like to me like throughout his career he would like conquer something, and then once he conquered it and like became the best at it, he was just like disillusioned instantly.
Yeah,
every time.
Yeah, because
and then made him move in another direction that like, whether you liked it or not, it just kept making him move in different directions.
Yeah, and I think that
always pretty much becoming one of the best at it. Like even like if we're talking like, let's talk way ahead at this point.
Yeah.
Into like the soft rock era, like in the 80s and 90s. I mean, Unplugged. His Unplugged album is like one of the biggest albums of all time.
Oh yeah, probably one of the most, definitely, I would say probably one of the most played Eric Clapton albums.
Even what's that song, My Father's Eyes? Like
Yeah.
that was a huge song for him, and it's like a completely different era and a completely different style,
Yeah.
like completely different style than Cream.
Well, you listen to Cream and then you hear like Forever Man and you're like, what?
Yeah, and it's like that.
You know?
I mean, it's not. I'm not saying like all that stuff's my deal, and like me and Mike like are kind of like, yeah, we're gonna talk to like about Derek and the Dominos, because that's where me and Mike really.
Kind of, it falls off for us after that.
Yeah,
Once Clapton goes solo, it's just like
For me, it's when Clapton starts playing that Stratocaster, man.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is like the switch to the Strat initially was not like a terrible move because you got Derek and the Dominos out of it. But it's like on Derek and the Dominos, you still have, not on all the songs, but you still have a Dwayne Allman coming in and ripping on his Les Paul. So you still, you know what I mean? You have that kind of a tone on there, but
Right. So Cream, Power Trio. Also, Mike, like, we're back with Mike for a guitar minute. Tell us about like the woman tone, like why, like the tone of Eric Clapton's guitar here again influences a whole nother genre and like generation of guitar,
absolutely.
like incarnation of guitar players.
Yeah, so like because he has the Les Paul, what the Les Paul offers, right, is it's a what it's called a humbucking pickups, right? So basically you kind of like you take, long story short, you like take two single coil pickups and you stick them together, and basically a single coil pickup running through an amplifier will have like a natural hum. You'll just hear like a zzz, you'll hear something like that. But what they found was that if they stick two of them right next to each other, it eliminates that hum. But what it also does is it offers a much richer, more saturated, darker, kind of more mid-ish kind of a tone. So what Clapton ended up doing was, what he found was if he rolled the tone knob back, it would create kind of like a muffled tone. But okay, so that happens, but you run it through like a fuzz pedal through a giant stack of amplifiers behind you, it does this really unique thing where it adds like a lot of like this sweetness.
Yeah, so he literally creates another famous tone called
the woman tone. Yeah,
right. So he has like the blues breaker tone, which is like every like guitar players still talk about it and use it to this day.
Yeah.
And then the woman tone is his psychedelic one, and guitar players still talk about it to this day because it was like such a different thing.
When I discovered the woman tone, it was probably like there was a good year where my tone was always rolled off. I just when Luke and I had a band called Heavy Krishna at one point that was very much influenced by like the sounds of Cream and Mountain and the like. And during that time, man, yeah, it was just like I would crank the amp, super saturated with like overdrive and stuff like that, and then just roll that tone knob down, and it just created such a unique sound that I loved so much.
And his guitar too, I like one of the first guitars to be like painted psychedelic.
We get the Fool.
Yeah, the Fool, which is like I think the artist's name is also the Fool.
Okay.
So like the Fool was his
it was a Gibson SG.
Yes.
But it was, at that model was probably still called the Les Paul because it was like.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't know, but it's like psychedelic painted. It's beautiful. And that guitar has passed hands, and it was also played by Todd Rundgren heavily in the 70s, who owned it for a long time.
I think he still owns it.
No, Todd plays a copy of it today. I think he sold it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe like charity or like
I don't know. I think he sold
donation.
I think he just sold it at one point, and he didn't own it anymore. And then in the 90s, he just started playing like a repro of it because he was also heavily connected to it. But I mean, it is Clapton made it famous,
Yeah, I mean that BBC special where they're talking about Eric Clapton.
Yeah, look that up, guys.
Yeah,
like if we're like pointing you in directions and albums to listen to, things to look at, that BBC documentary of their Cream's last show.
Yeah, the farewell show.
Yeah, he really goes over like the woman tone and everything. And
yeah. And the wah pedal too, because like the wah pedal was kind of a new thing. That was kind of like a new hip thing.
He innovated that sound too.
Absolutely.
Like, I loved listening to Fresh Cream. I love Fresh Cream so much. Like I Feel Free is such a innovative track. Like it's so out there. Like it takes like For Your Love for the Yardbirds and just like kicks the crap out of it. It rocks so much harder.
Yeah. Well,
even like the intro, like the bump 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 ba-dum bump. It's like that hits so hard. Like the band was like they were really cool. Like in the harmonies and melodies that like I was
Jack
listening
Bruce
to it
is
in
so
headphones.
animated.
Yeah, like his voice
You
is so
know?
crazy, and like Eric Clapton's voice is so wispy, and like they layer really cool on top of each other. Like
Yeah.
even like the
Yeah,
like
yeah,
when
I
you're
love
listening to that in headphones, it
I
was
love that melody.
wicked cool. So yeah, Fresh Cream comes out. I mean, that's like a groundbreaking album, but the real kicker is the follow up.
Disraeli Gears.
Yeah, Disraeli
It's
Gears.
on the bottom of the stack there.
Oh, here it is. Yes. And
Yeah,
this
and
this is
even the album cover just screams
psychedelia.
Psychedelia, yeah, absolutely. It's like that hot pink color with all the crazy kind of collage, like
I think this
overlaid.
this might be the same artist that painted Clapton's guitar too, but I'm not positive on
Oh,
that.
okay, yeah. I mean, it looks, stylistically, it looks very similar. But that was the style of the psychedelic era anyway. It was very like like bright, saturated colors and
Yeah, so
all kinds of
I mean,
swooshy
this
designs.
album is you get the Bruce Brown. That's the other like the writing partner. Like, and let's talk to like Jack Bruce is one of the most innovative like electric bass players.
Oh yeah, man.
Of the time. Like he comes
hands
from like
down.
the upright period, and then like really just brings like he's like how would you describe it? Thumpy, like
He's
rubber bandy.
And he's not
Busy, definitely busy, noodly, definitely noodly.
Oh yeah, but I think with him, because of the heavy jazz influence, he's not afraid to play sour notes. So if you listen to like I'm So Glad on the Goodbye album,
Yeah,
there's a point there
he'll
where he's
be
just like all these crazy, what sounds like wrong notes, but it's just so searing and like controlled chaos that you're like, well, all right, like you take it anyway. You're like, all right.
Right, and like, okay, so let's talk to Felix Pappalardi produces this one, right?
Felix Pappalardi.
I think he does. Right, he's a producer.
Yeah, he's a
on
producer on Disraeli Gears. I thought he'd produced both of them. I thought he did Fresh Cream and Disraeli Gears. Or was it Disraeli Gears and Wheels of Fire, maybe?
It's got the end. Oh, yeah, Felix produced this.
Yeah, Felix, who would then go on to be the bass player for the band Mountain, which we talked
Right.
about in our Power Trios episode.
Yeah, Power Trio episode. Check that out. Yeah, so Felix Pappalardi's on this. He really produces some of these songs, and then you get like the Bruce Brown collaboration, which is bringing like a more poetic psychedelic lyric in.
Yep.
The album opener, Strange Brew. It's a blues song. The solo on there is awesome. It's
it's so
classic
good.
woman tone, right?
Yeah.
And then like it's got spookier lyrics. I really love that song. That's probably my favorite on here. You get the classic Sunshine of Your Love.
Which, I mean, Sunshine of Your Love, I mean...
It's the classic psychedelic song.
And
Everybody
think about
knows
that, just that... Like that, just that idea as like a guitar riff has been recycled and reused. So it's like when Black Sabbath did the tritone, the bow, bow, bow.
Yes.
Like how many metal bands after that would incorporate that into their music? Likewise with Sunshine of Your Love, just like Smoke on the Water. Like there's just these kind of nuanced things.
It's like it's almost like proto metal.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so heavy.
Yeah, very much influencing, like the stoner metal.
Yeah,
like
and the guitar is double track too. Like that innovation of having it like sound heavier, like the solo, you could hear it coming like out of both. It's like it's double tracked on it. You could tell it's so cool. Like,
even the solo that he takes,
and the lyrics are like overtly psychedelic too.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole other layer of it. I think it's like the perfect summer, of love, psychedelic-y, and it goes with like the album cover is so psychedelic too. It's just,
dude, even like
and the guitar playing on there is so great. I mean, like Sunshine of Your Love is like another like Smoke on the Water kind of one.
Absolutely. Side 2 is pretty killer too, though, because you have like Tales of Brave Ulysses, which, like, let's be real, is the same song as White Room.
Yeah,
like it's basically the same song.
It doesn't matter though.
Yeah,
I like it better than White Room.
Oh, me too. I love Tales of Brave Ulysses.
And then
Outside Woman Blues is so good.
Crazy good.
So good.
Mike was trying to tell me that, like, he's like, yeah, Live Cream's where it's at, and I was like, no, man, listen, Fresh Cream and Disraeli Gears are great albums, studio albums of just like psychedelic awesomeness. It has the blues thing going on, but it's also so guitar based in another direction.
Yeah.
Also on here is but the rainbow has a beard.
Yeah.
SWLABR Swablar. Yeah, whatever the heck that name of that song is. I
Yeah,
think it's
Swabbler.
it's like the B-side to I think it's the B-side to
Sunshine. Yeah, no, it is because I have that 45 at home.
Yeah, I mean, I love that song too.
Yeah.
You know, you just got that rainbow feel.
Yeah, and that's what. And I mean, going back to Jack Bruce, man, just as a vocalist too, like
So
it's
expressive.
So, yeah.
I love Jack Bruce.
So animated, so like just so like.
And Clapton's guitar, like the bam 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 digga 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 dum.
Yeah.
You know, bam, 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 like you hear how double tracked it is. It's so good.
Yeah, it's
his guitar on this album. I mean, I love it. And like, I'm not like any Clapton era is mine. It's Cream. I mean, like I've talked on the show before how like Cream, how much I love Cream, and how like for me they were such a band I could branch off to so many other
Absolutely. Yeah. They make a lot of other bands more accessible.
Yeah. Also, like if we're talking, you want to dive deeper into this, I think there's a classic albums episode of Disraeli Gears that I think
I'm sure
when I was younger got me definitely I think was what really pushed me to listen to more Cream.
Yeah, man.
Like that episode, and there's like nothing wrong with that, guys. Like those classic albums, like episodes are great. That's how I discovered the band.
Yeah, like let's not get pretentious in that way where we're like, I need a Martin Scorsese directed documentary if it's going to be worth it for me to watch it. It's like, no, man, you can watch that one classic albums that aired on like VH1 in like 2003
those
at like
were
Thursday
great.
night,
Those were great, and they gave me so much context too. Like even the one like on Pink Floyd when you're a young kid and you're just like trying to grasp the concept of because everyone's like, there's a concept album, and you're like 11, 13, you're like,
right.
You're like, oh, what the heck are they talking about? Like, and then it would give you like context to it, and then there were fun ones too. Like there was like Meatloaf one, there was a Nirvana one. Like check those out because there is definitely one on Disraeli Gears that I watched, and it made me like really pumped up to like listen to that record and like really gave me context to it.
Yeah. So after Disraeli Gears, what is it? It's White Room.
White Room.
White Room. Well, White Room's on it, but yeah, Wheels of Fire.
Yeah, Wheels of Fire comes out,
which is also equally a pretty cool like psychedelic cover. I mean, I love the album art. I love the album art on like every album.
This album I don't hate, but it's definitely like it gets weaker for me on this one.
Yeah.
But also you get introduced to the live Cream.
Yeah.
Which is like
would come to kind of define them, I think.
Right. And the live era is, for me, I'm like, that's our favorite.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, like, Cream changed the way that I even just, like, looked at, like, how live music could be played.
Right.
Because everything, especially coming out of, I feel like, stupid because I keep saying it, but like especially coming out of like the metal thing where like everything was deliberate. There was a very specific way in which you played everything.
Yeah, like psychedelic jamming, like hearing that for the first time.
It just blew my mind.
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
Like, oh my god, you can do that?
Yeah,
like that's allowed?
Yeah, like we talked too. Like it's not like the Grateful Dead jam either. It's
that's the thing I love.
So intense.
That's the thing.
It's like
that's the thing I love the most about it. Is how not Grateful Dead jammy it was, because I was like, this is just like everything I love.
Allman Brothers jammy either.
Right.
It's like heavy jamming. So like you have three guys who are basically coming out of like the jazz school of it. That when they are extendedly jamming, they're jamming in like a bebop form almost, or like a free jazz at times, where they're making like complete noise and then trying to outplay each other at everything. So like it's the competitive playing nature of it. And like to talk to, man, they do Crossroads on here, which becomes like the Clapton classic. Like,
oh yeah, anytime you're like listening, like the other day, it's like I was listening to the radio and they're just like Eric Clapton, it's a double play weekend, and they're like, sure as shit, Crossroads is on. You know what I mean? Like it comes up, man, because it's like it's just one of the. It's in my opinion, it's one of the greatest like live cuts.
Right.
Like,
I mean, that side of the record, and let's talk too about like how this record is one of the first rock and roll double albums, where you would have like the studio side, the live side, I know like the Byrds did that in '69. Like a ton of people would
Mountain would end up going off to do that too.
Yeah, live and and like, but the double album in rock and roll too. Like I think this is '67, right? 68 this is, but this is like one of that era when this is first happening, and like just like the sets, like just for people to hear, I can't imagine what people, because like me and you, like our minds were blown in like the 2000s when we heard it. I can't imagine what people were like thinking of then, because you also have the,
this is the new,
you also have the 16-minute.
Well, and that's what I think is so interesting.
Also, did you ever notice Crossroads on here is edited? You ever hear the cut in it?
Oh no.
Yeah, there's cuts in it.
Is there?
Yeah. That song was much longer.
I didn't know that.
I think Spoonful might be edited as well. But there's like a
oh my god! But that version of
16,
Spoonful,
it's 16 minutes and 44 seconds on
That's
here.
the thing I love about this though, because if you think about it, man, you're coming out of like the very, very British like singles game, right? We've talked about this before, where like the American way of consuming music was like, you know, we would do the album, but the UK was very much
to some extent, but I mean, even in the US, the more the case was you would get the single on the album.
Oh, right.
When you bought it, you would get the single on the album. So like that's why our Beatles albums are all like with, you know, filled with singles only from the UK, where like you would get, you know, the album would come out and then there'd be a single that wasn't on the album, so you would have to buy both. But they would, like in the Beatles, you know, they would get the they would still be kind of in the same period, you know.
Yeah. But that's what I mean though, is I love how like there is this kind of paradigm shift where it's like, no, now you will listen to a 16-minute version of Spoonful, you know, and that I think that in a way would also pave the way.
They were the innovators for the Grateful Dead, for everybody to jam.
Well, yeah, or even even the like when you would like later get like a song like Echoes from Pink Floyd. It's just kind of like, no, now people can listen to like a 20-minute song. You know, it's within your grasp. Like I feel like before you had these real like deep cuts and stuff, the only like really long songs you might find is like somewhere in the jazz realm,
right?
You know what I mean, or classical music. But
okay, so you're
pop music in that sense.
We're speaking highly to the long form song, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate, because I do enjoy listening to a 16 and 20-minute song, guys. Like I can get down with it, especially in the vinyl format. But so, like, let's talk, like, the devil's advocate version of it is Clapton would tend to lean on this long version, and bands would do this where they would, like, have, like, a short repertoire of songs and then just keep stretching them out. You know what I mean? And then, and then it would become, that was actually the downfall of Cream, really, was the aggressive playing against each other and then not writing stronger songs.
And that, I mean, that was, I think, the big driving force behind even, I mean, okay, there was a lot of interpersonal relationship issues with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, but Eric Clapton, obviously that contributed, but I think for Clapton, he listened to music from Big Pink, the band, and he was like, oh,
he was realizing
songwriting, not playing for the sake of playing. And because that's what Cream ended up becoming, was they were just the band that just like played crazy and busy the whole time just for the sake of playing, because people were like, oh, well, this is just what Cream does.
They got lost in the sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. No. I mean, for real, man. Yeah.
So, but even around the time of this album coming out, you know what I mean? We're talking Wheels of Fire.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, if you want to talk songs on it, I mean, it's got Politician, which is probably my favorite Cream song of all time. If you want the definitive version, it's on the next record, though, Goodbye Cream.
Oh, yeah. But, like, I mean, I listened to Politician the other night, and I'm like, this was written, whatever, 1968. And it still feels so relevant right now,
right?
You know what I mean? Because I think that like today's political climate leaves a lot of us kind of like confused and like not really knowing, kind of questioning, you know, what is my political view, what are my, you know, this kind of introspective sort of thinking. And I think that when I listened to Politician, I was like, oh man, yeah, like
that's one of my favorite songs.
This is a really clever way about talking about politics that's very much away from maybe say like how punk would incorporate politics into the way that
stand outside the box of it too, you know what I mean, and just kind of comment on the situation.
He's like, I support the left, but I'm leaning to the right, you know, like where he's like basically like I'm just kind of like trying to do this balancing act of like figuring out like, you know, like politically like what's going on, you know. I think I hear it that way. I hear it like a bigger picture.
When I listen to it, I kind of get like the vibe of it being like the politician really not having any worth of like standing in one direction, you know what I mean? Because I leaning both ways, like, yeah, well, I'll show you what my politics are, you know, depending on what you want,
right.
kind of thing, you know, kind of like the facade.
Yeah,
because
he says, "Hey, baby, get into my big black car."
Yeah,
you know,
I want to show you what my politics are. You know, it's like it's dirt. You know, the dirty, like know. That's how I see it.
But yeah, I mean, there's it's just there's some great great
also,
songwriting. But
also on Disraeli Gears, you have Take It Back. Take that thing right out of here, which is like kind of like their protesty song too on that one.
Yeah. So, but again, now by the time we get to like Wheels of Fire, Cream, I feel like this is kind of like the beginning of the end, because like then you get. There's
Born Under a Bad Sign's on here too. I don't know why. I feel like I listened to this a while ago and I didn't think it was as good, but I feel like all the Cream albums are great.
Yeah, no, it's good, and that's a Albert King tune.
Yeah, I mean, seek out that album too by Albert King, Born Under a Bad Sign. They're just covering it pretty much straight here.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's like
it's still good. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, like I mean, too, like Cream led me and Mike to so many original blues artists too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like listening to like Crossroads on here, it definitely led us to Robert Johnson. Like,
well, because you look at like a songwriting credit and you're like Robert Johnson. And what's so funny is like you listen to the Robert Johnson Crossroads and it couldn't be more different,
right? And that
but
that
you're
shows
still like, oh,
and that shows how like Clapton would innovate the blues for the electric guitar as well, for everybody else to follow later. You know?
Speed it up, distort it, make it kind of make it more accessible in this kind of atmosphere. This sort of communal atmosphere.
So I mean, and then the next album, Goodbye Cream too. Like if we're talking like live Cream, we would also like seek out anything live from Cream. It's usually amazing. The jamming is good, and if you like it, like the studio records, I think you will really appreciate like the virtuosity of their playing. I mean, Goodbye Cream has my favorite take of Politician on it. It's also got the crazy, awesome version of I'm So Glad.
Oh, I love it.
It's really like a farewell. Yeah, I mean, me and Mike go crazy over those live versions of like Politician and I'm So Glad.
It's so good.
I mean, like the cowbell intro to I'm So Glad.
It's just, I don't know. It just does it for me, man. It just does it for me,
Yeah, and I mean, if we're talking like the vinyl format, which obviously I'm more familiar with, everybody, if you've been listening, Live Cream Volume 2 and Goodbye Cream have live cuts on it. So does obviously, like we were just talking about, Wheels of Fire.
Yeah.
The whole second record's live. So I mean, that's where I'm coming from. Also on here is Badge, which
oh yeah.
Eric Clapton. Is that the one, George Harrison? I don't know if it says Clapton, but I'm pretty sure.
What, Harrison's on it? But that kind of stuff happened all the time back then anyway. Like Clapton didn't get the credit for the solo on
Wild My Guitar.
Right, because it's all like rights and who
I
can
think one of the songs on
and,
Goodbye Cream has a George Harrison helped write it though. But so anyway, you got all that going on.
Yeah.
Cream is kind of wrapping up, like we said, because of the long jamming. Clapton really hears the band's music from Big Pink, like Mike had said, and it really. And there was a review in Rolling Stone that was quite critical of Cream and said that they were like kind of like fluff, because like I mean there was an artistic movement happening. Around, Big Pink, where like you had Bob Dylan kind of like getting, country rockish.
Yeah.
John Wesley Harding, I think, comes out around that period. And then, music for Big Pink is like 68. And you kind of got this like Let's Go Soft, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Sweetheart of the Rodeo by the Byrds. That there's this kind of movement.
Because you like all this stuff's happening in the UK, but meanwhile in California, you know what I mean? There's a lot brewing. You have the Beach Boys, you've got, especially once psychedelia starts happening, you have like the Grateful Deads, the Janis Joplin and the
right. And as influential as Cream were, because they influenced everybody. They kind of like lit the match a little bit. Especially for like the rock show too, like the Fillmore concert, like what everybody thinks of the Fillmore concerts, that comes straight out of Cream. Like Cream, Cream were so big in the U.S. too. Like they toured the U.S. heavily. They were so big, so influential. They influenced everybody, especially like having those big concerts like that at the Fillmore and really creating like the psychedelic scene.
Yeah.
You know, where they would lay down like that kind of like groovy, jammy atmosphere. But like the Cream swallowed itself whole, and Clapton realized like after he read like that review of himself where he, you know, they were like, it's so self-indulgent, you know, at some point, and it's lazy. And so Cream calls it quits, and Clapton's like, I gotta do something more earthy. So what does Clapton end up doing?
Well, initially you get the Delaney and Bonnie, right?
Oh,
was
yeah,
was Delaney and Bonnie before Blind Faith?
No.
Oh, it was Blind Faith.
Blind Faith.
Because wasn't it that Delaney and Bonnie were on tour? They were touring with Blind Faith, and that's where he made that leap. Yeah. So then you have Blind Faith. So he links up with Steve Winwood, and the story of it is great because like
Steve Winwood comes out of the Spencer Davis Group, another originally kind of bluesy based R&B.
That album is killer, man. It's like that bright orangey color.
Is Steve Winwood on that one? I'm a Man. I think he is.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
You have I think Autumn '66 is another one. But yeah, so anyway.
But good, man. So Steve Winwood, I mean, he has chops. Yeah. And he's so young too at the time.
Right.
He's like 16 years old, man.
And his brother is also in the Spencer Davis group, Muff Winwood.
Okay.
So
yeah. So anyway, so he links up with
and
Steve
then
Winwood.
Traffic after that. So he forms Traffic after that because one gets more experiment. Clapton kind of is they kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah.
The real link with him is this album right here, Mike. It's called What's Shakin'.
Yeah.
So this is before Cream even, but this is important to we're gonna dial back here. There's an album that was put out. If you look it up online, it's called What's Shakin' by Elektra Records. It has the first recordings of the Loving Spoonful. Has the only recordings of this supergroup called Eric Clapton and Powerhouse, and that has Jack Bruce on bass and Steve Winwood. And it has I think the drummer is also from the Spencer Davis Group. I don't know his name off the top of my head.
Okay.
But look up this album. It's called What's Shakin', the Paul Butterfield Blues Band plus Lovin' Spoonful, Tom Rush, Al Cooper.
Paul Butterfield Blues Band.
This is
so good.
And this is some of the first recordings from Paul Butterfield as well. So seek this album out. It's a really great completion piece really from Elektra Records. And so this is where really Eric Clapton met Steve Winwood and really started jamming. And that was made for this album, and nothing really came of it there because Eric Clapton formed Cream right after. But they had already played, so this is the history of that.
Yeah.
So
there's the link.
Right. So they kind of do like lazy finding though, and they get Ginger Baker, and this is why I think this band does not last. So Blind Faith opens up. Like they record their album, right?
Yeah.
And then they play the Hyde Park to 100,000 people, and like instantly Clapton's like, "Oh, I hate this." Like you could see it.
You can see, he doesn't seem to be enjoying himself. But to backtrack, I guess the story of the Ginger Baker thing, Clapton didn't know that Ginger Baker was supposed to be the drummer.
Oh, really?
So they show up to the studio or whatever, and like Steve, as the story goes, as I have heard it, was that Clapton shows up to the studio, like where they're gonna like the jam area or whatever, the practice spot, and Clapton's just like, hey, so like who do you end up finding to be a drummer? And like as the story goes, like right around the time where Clapton asks who's the drummer gonna be, Ginger Baker just comes barreling ass down the road and just pulls up in his car, and he's like, hey, like in the typical Ginger Baker way. And Clapton was like, "Oh, god damn it!"
Yeah, because if you don't know, like Eric Clapton, for all like his eccentric habits or drug whatever, but Ginger Baker is primal. He's like a monkey primal crazy man.
Oh yeah,
he's absolutely insane.
We'll put it this way: we can say this that the documentary
Beware of Mr. Baker.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like just the title of the documentary itself speaks volumes to the type of person that Ginger Baker is. Which it's Beware of Mr. Baker, and he actually has that sign. Had R.I.P. But he had that sign out in front of his house where it says "Beware of Mr. Baker." And the opening scene to the documentary is him clubbing the documentarian like in the head with his cane,
breaking his nose.
Yeah, threatening that he's going to send him to the hospital and all that
he
stuff.
did, because
you know?
he broke that dude's nose.
Yeah. You see, there's a picture afterwards. He's like cut on the bridge of his nose. Anyway, but that's the thing is that Ginger Baker was very much just like, you know what I mean? I feel like he is like a soul brother with like Keith Moon, you know, and just that like just crazy outlandish kind of a personality. And
Clapton's like, at least from what I see, is more like kind of like maybe more shy, more laid back.
Yeah. And that, well, I mean,
reserved.
I think the greatest part of that documentary is like there's like a cut of Ginger Baker, and he's like, I love Eric Clapton. He's like my brother. He's like my soul brother. Whatever. And then it like cuts to Clapton. He's like, do I even know Ginger Baker? I don't know. You know, and you're like, oh my god.
You know, I was like, I wouldn't call him a friend by any means.
You know, it's up to that extent, and you're like, man, there's so much. It's like, you know, but
animosity.
Yeah, because
Ginger Baker is just crazy.
He's just a hard dude to deal with, man. Like, he's a big personality, you know.
Right. So like that Blind Faith record comes out, and it's another supergroup for Clapton, and it's like, you know, I think he's instantly disillusioned, but it has some killer, more laid back, like we were talking in the country, not country, but like more groovy, like maybe the songwriting's a little more there.
Yeah, absolutely more focused on
still riff rocking. For me, what makes it heavier, it's like Ginger Baker's drumming is just so heavy and busy and jazzy and kind of like.
Well, you listen to "Had to Cry" and he does these like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He doesn't just like lock into a groove with like.
But "Had to Cry," one of the greatest guitar songs of all time.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my god, I love that song.
Me too.
I love that song.
I mean, what this record is great. I love the
Presence of the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, Clapton solo on that one, and Clapton sings that one as well, right?
No, Steve Winwood sings that.
You're right.
But Eric Clapton, he wrote it though.
Right.
You know, which, speaking to Eric Clapton and his life, like, let's talk about what's happening in Eric Clapton's life at this point, which is like, it's the beginnings of his infatuation with Pattie Boyd, who was George Harrison's wife.
Right, and George Harrison also collaborated with the Beatles on the White Album in '68, playing While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Yeah, Clapton.
He's great friends with George Harrison, best friends.
Right, they were best friends, so he's like in love with his best friend's wife. So there's and like just his life leading up to that point, you know, in general. You know, so here we kind of have the very beginning of what would end up becoming what kind of like arguably his like magnum opus, which I mean, at least for me was, you know, Derek and the Dominos. But we're skipping ahead a little bit.
So yeah, like Blind Faith forms, and they end up touring really fast, and there's a lot of hype behind them. The Hyde Park concert happens. That's on YouTube. Check it out. Blind Faith live at Hyde Park. It's like an hour long. It's really good.
And it's on the live thing it was made into an album, and it's on most streaming services as well. So
right. And I mean, it's great. I mean, it doesn't sound bad. They Clapton's like, we were under rehearsed, blah blah blah. But
you can hear that though, because I listened to it, and I'm not going to say that I was like disappointed, but I was kind of like, it's just the magic for me is on the album, not on the live.
Right.
You know, I don't know. There's just something about it's just it felt good on the album, but like live, you can like we said before, and you can just see in Clapton's face where he's just kind of like, I think he seems frustrated,
right?
Because he's just like, oh, I'm trying to just do this thing, and like it's just not exactly what I want it to be,
right? Because I mean, you're still playing with like Ginger Baker, who's got that like play through you kind of thing.
Right.
And
he's
the
very
vibe I
much,
get. It's like the play through you instead of play with it. We're talking like Keith Moon. Keith Moon would play to the song more than, I mean, he would play through you, but it was for the song,
right?
To some extent, you know.
Where Ginger Baker was just like, I'm Ginger Baker,
right?
You know, so I have to. He's like really caught up in his Ginger Bakerness. You
right.
know what I mean? His ego was, you know.
Right.
You know, crazy.
And so they tour the U.S., you know, and then they start playing Cream songs, and then they start playing Trap, you know, Spencer Day, and it's just like, Clapton's like, oh, this is turning into Cream all over again.
Right. It's kind of like moving backwards.
While they're on tour, Delaney and Bonnie is the opening act. And they're playing a more, you know, like out of, you know, the band kind of laid back, more R&B grooves.
Right.
And he starts sitting in with them, like opening up for, you know, with them, playing with them, you know, and he becomes like, he comes all on board with them. So he ends up hopping on a tour with them, and they release a live album, Delaney Bonnie
and Friends.
Yeah.
It's got like the old, like that
right
30s style car, right? I don't know what model car that is. I'm sorry for anyone who's listening who's a car aficionado.
I have it somewhere.
Yeah, I saw it. It was in the stack. I don't know. It got lost in the stack somewhere. Yeah, this was an album that I have absolutely listened to. However, did not get a chance to revisit it as I wanted to. The sad part is I kind of like remembered not liking it, but I definitely think that if I went back and listened to it with kind of fresh ears again, because I mean you did, and you're like, dude, yeah. You're like, this album actually like kicks pretty good. Like,
yeah, so when I first listened to it, I think I was more on that like Cream, like trying to like listen to everything Clapton did, and then when it was different, I was like, man, this is challenging.
Yeah, right,
kind of thing. And it really isn't challenging. It was just not what I wanted to hear at the time. So I cleaned up this bad boy, I put it on, and I really liked it. Clapton's playing awesome on it. And this album, it's called Delaney, Bonnie, and Friends, on tour with Eric Clapton. And it's got some kicking players on it. It's got Bobby Keys on sax, some Rolling Stones.
Yep.
Is Jim Gordon on drums? Who's on drums here? Delaney, Bonnie, Dave Mason on guitar. Jim Gordon on drums.
Yeah.
Bob Whitlock on organ.
Who would go on to...
Yep. And is Jim Gordon also the drummer on Layla?
I want to say yes, but I'm not 100%
I'm almost
sure.
positive it is. But when we get there, which is very soon, everybody, we will definitively tell you. But yeah, you have all these great musicians, on here. Rita Coolidge on vocals, Bobby Keys, like we just said. Clapton, Dave Mason. The lineup on this is amazing. And this is more like a soulful kind of thing. You got more, bluesy stuff, but it's more laid back, and it's where Clapton wanted to go. And I really liked the playing on this record. I thought it was really cool. It also reminded me of Mad Dogs and Englishmen with like the ensemble playing. Everybody's like it sounds like everybody's having a lot of fun, which is kind of cool. And for me, I always like Clapton in a sideman. Like when I feel like he's like playing with somebody who's like his par, he can kind of like chill out more and like play for like the song or whatever. And I feel like that's why Layla is so good. And then listening back, I really love this Delaney and Bonnie record. I thought it was really cool. It's a great listen.
Yeah. And it like, I mean, I'll totally agree with you on that, because I think that, and again, I mean, dude, listen, it's on that the Clapton is God, right? People are writing this down. Clapton is God. And like the 16, 17-year-old kid aspiring to be a great guitarist, place in you is just like, oh my God, they like me. But at the same time, then you have to you have to keep, you have reputations to kind of hold up. And they would throw around like all these words that's like genius and innovator, virtuoso, and whatever. And I mean, he referred to himself as like a pseudo virtuoso, because he's just like, no, like stop, like. Right, and I think that
because also this whole time he would like shout out like BB King and you know what I mean, like Live at the Regal, and pointing back as well,
being like, I'm. Like, yes, I play this, but like,
have you ever listened to BB King?
I'm not the guy. Like, the guys are BB King and Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy.
Right. So
to a certain extent.
He kind of like changes his style up too, like and kind of just ends up switching to the Strat, which really kind of changes his sound, like we were saying before too. He definitely drops the psychedelic act with Delaney and Bonnie. And right after the On Tour album comes out, he releases the first Eric Clapton solo album, which is what? I think that's 1970 comes out?
I think it's April of 1970, and then Derek and the Dominos comes out August of 1970.
Right, and Brownie's on the front cover. That's really an extension of the On Friends tour, that first Eric Clapton solo album.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the same players that are on this record are on that, and it's more of a laid-back thing. It's not like a bad record, but for me and Mike, it's kind of like signals the beginning of the end, where like me and Mike really don't like Ocean Boulevard.
No, none of that. And the thing is, well, I will say this: although his switch to the Strat, it was kind of, in our opinion, his undoing. This is kind of the first time where we actually see what would end up becoming the fad in most boutique guitar collectors' things, which is basically saying, oh, okay, we're going to do a limited run. We're going to get the original, I don't know what it was. It was like a 1958 or whatever Stratocaster that was Brownie.
Right.
So this is the thing where not only does the guitar player end up having kind of this sort of like mystical quality about him or her, but it would then go on to become the guitar that they used would also kind of became like this mystical tool, that it was like, oh, Brownie, like this is what's Brownie? Oh, that's his guitar. Oh,
right.
okay,
It's on the cover of his first solo album.
Right.
And on here too, Clapton like kind of writes more of like the singer-songwriter vibe, right? Like that.
I don't hate the first album.
Me either. I think it's pretty good. It's a solid listen.
Yeah, it's not bad. But the thing is that you listen to Derek and the Dominos, and that album to me just has that little bit of like refinement.
It's so much better for me.
And the thing is though too is for me, Derek and the Dominos, Layla is what is the driving force behind that album, which is a love-stricken man. So I think that
the artistic vision on Layla is so much more like high gloss on it, because it has like so much more emotion on it, where like the first Clapton solo album, which is like, it's good, but it doesn't have that like, it's almost like reserved, right?
Well, I
think,
I think that the first Clapton album is just a result of like Delaney and Bonnie being like, hey man, like you have a halfway decent voice, like did you ever think of maybe just becoming like your own songwriter and just releasing your own album? He's like, I guess maybe I should do that. Like I'm not super confident in my voice and whatever, but I guess I should do that. And he does it, and I think he goes, oh no, I can do this. So now let me just piece together like every great musician in my atmosphere, whatever, within my whatever. And then we have Derek and the Dominos, but again, it's just that perfect melding of not only top-notch musicians, but also an artistic vision that Patty Boyd would serve as kind of like his muse, because he was infatuated with Patty Boyd. Like,
and too, like the artistic vision of the band not being Eric Clapton and blah, blah, blah. The band's called Derek and the Dominos for a reason, because he didn't want you to know that he was the driving force behind it.
Right.
And so like you have that artistic side of it too. And like when this came out, this album flopped. Like Derek and the Dominos.
Oh yeah, it was not well received.
It's a double album too as well. So like there's a lot of material on it. You kind of got like the blues standardy thing throwback, but it's all themed around this like infatuation with George Harrison's wife, Patty Boyd, and that really rises to the occasion on the song Layla, which is the classic riff, the classic slide solo, and like. Let's talk to that too. Is Duane Allman really coming into the picture and like helping Clapton like reach this statement?
Absolutely.
And Derek and the Dominos too is Jim Gordon on drums. Yeah, I was right. Bobby Whitlock on organ, which really formed out of that Delaney and Bonnie stuff.
Yep.
And then Duane Allman. So they come down to the U.S. to record this album. Derek and the Dominos, and Clapton meets up with Duane Allman at an Allman Brothers show. I think he attends an Allman Brothers concert.
Yeah, he's like blown away.
Right. So like we were talking, like the Beano album is so influential, right? And those guys, like the Allmans, listened to that record and were so influenced by it. So Clapton goes down there and they were like, oh, you want to go see the Allmans? And they were in Clapton's like, oh, that's that dude that plays on the end of Wilson Pickett's Hey Jude.
Yeah.
Yeah, take me. I want to see that guy play the guitar.
Yeah.
So they go to the Allmans concert, and I guess the story is Duane, when he saw Eric Clapton in the audience, was so starstruck, and like he was in the middle of a solo and just stopped playing. And the other guitar player is Dickie Betts, right?
Yeah, Dickie Betts.
So Dickie Betts like looks over and he's like, what the heck? So he like just picks up and he starts off soloing, and then he saw Clapton and he got so afraid that he had to turn around and keep soloing. So like, he had to pretend he wasn't there.
Think about that though. I mean, for pretty much every other guitar player who would follow, they, again, if
Clapton's so influential.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, I can't even imagine how scary that must have been, But the Allman Brothers, just to speak to them real quick, what I think makes them so unique is that I think the advantage that, say, maybe like Duane Allman had, which was very similar to, say, the advantage that Mike Bloomfield had, which was that by living in the States and being around sort of these hubs of like blues music, where Mike Bloomfield was in Chicago and likewise Duane Allman in, down south in Florida, that they were able to actually like go in to these like blues clubs and hang out with like these kind of like original blues guys,
Yeah,
you know?
and
So
really pick up like the actual essence of what it was a little bit more.
Yeah.
And Dwayne was famous for his slide playing. He was one of the best slide guitar players that had ever lived.
Yeah, he's
like,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and
Absolutely.
especially if we're talking the electric, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, white version of the blues. I feel like you have Alan Wilson's slide playing,
Yep.
and then Dwayne Allman is like the next one. Alan
Absolutely.
Wilson being from the band Canned Heat, Kings the Boogie.
Yeah, don't sleep on Canned Heat either. A great American.
Yeah, we're gonna do that episode coming up soon.
Yeah, we have to.
Alan Wilson's one of my favorite guitar players.
Yeah,
so
he
like
did so
he's
much.
like one of the greatest slide players that has ever existed. And then you also have Dwayne Allman, who innovates it with, you know, he has that. What does he play? Les Paul, right?
Yeah, he's got a Les Paul. I think he had a gold top, and I think he had a burst.
Yeah, and it's just like he really creates that whole era of like his slide playing. I don't think anyone's ever played better.
No, I don't think so. And how proficient he became in slide playing in such a short amount of time too. That's the kicker, where you're like, what? He like figured it out in like a year, and then all of a sudden he's like one of the greatest slide players to have ever lived. You're like, what?
So him and Clapton meet after that show though, and they really talk shop and they bond really fast. And
yeah, they become very close friends.
It's a perfect storm. They both have the opportunity to go play together in the studio, and they really push each other, and they're having a lot of fun. I mean, if you look on the inside of this album, it just looks like they are stoned and having a great time. Like every picture is like them, like with squinty eyes. And
I will say though,
know, they're in the studio and they look like they're really working hard to make this album. And I mean, and this album's amazing. There's so many classic songs on here.
Around this time though, and I think adding to the idea that Luke and I have, where it's like the beginning of the end. At this point, this is where Eric Clapton is introduced to heroin.
Yeah, so also that's happening as well.
So that's kind of happening in the background. So here you have this heartbroken man who is just like trying to write this piece of music to express his love for Patty Boyd. And at one point, okay, so the album is made, right? And he like brings it to Patty Boyd and he plays the song Layla for her. And she rejects him.
Right.
She's like this, you know, and you hear interviews with her and she's like, oh my God, it's like, it's amazing. It's incredible that he would write this for me and it would be so amazing and all that. But she's still like, no. And I think that's where the spiral starts out happening, because kind of in a way, sort of like hiatus that Brian Wilson took when he kind of like lost it for a little bit. Eric Clapton does a very similar thing where he like
he drops out and until like Pete Townsend kind of was his champion to bring him back, because Pete Townsend I think was also struggling himself with like alcohol and other substances.
Oh yeah, but that's so Clapton does kick heroin, but then
I think it's in like 73, 74, like the Rainbow concert is his comeback.
But then what you have is an alcoholic Eric Clapton.
Yes.
Because, so basically Clapton, what he does is he swaps out one addiction for another. He's like, oh, I kicked heroin, but now I'm just slamming drinks. Like,
right.
And you can even see, I saw footage where he like kind of comes on stage during that show that was supposed to be like his comeback or whatever, and he's loaded.
Right.
He's so drunk, which would end up leading to kind of a controversial part.
Oh yeah, because he said some very unsavory things.
Yeah, he said some like really just not good stuff. Because at the time, I mean, politics are politics, man. You're talking about things like immigration and stuff, and this has always been happening, politically speaking and stuff. And I guess at a show, he made some remarks that were very much like anti-immigration and like kind of racist stuff,
I know. I believe they were overtly racist.
Yeah, they're definitely racist. Like, yeah, his terminology, which he made it. He came out with a statement after the fact and stuff like that, and like he obviously was good friends with like BB King and everything like that. But I think what we really had in that moment was just a man
complete downward spiral.
Yeah, just
control.
unraveling.
Drug addict.
Exactly. Drug addict, alcoholic, like just not even caring. Like,
but don't hard times make good music. Like Layla is like such a statement of like, that bad feeling.
Dude,
but it's so like, I mean, Bell Bottom Blues, like the soloing, the singing on it. Like, it's just so, it's so emotional.
And isn't that idea sort of resonant with most people? In other words, I mean, I'm not going to assume, but I'm saying like there was definitely a point in my life where, even though I was like a young man, like, early 20, like late late teens, early 20s, where there was it seems to be a common story where it's just like you kind of have a crush on your buddy's girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like, I think that kind of a thing happens just as a part of growing up. You know what I mean? Like, young, because everyone's confused. Nobody knows what's going. You know what I mean? So like, but I mean, Clapton obviously took it to a different level.
Yeah, this is the best. Like, it's like my best friend's girl. Like the Cars. Like, it's that same kind of vibe. But like, this is like, I mean, how heartbreaking does Layla get? You know what I mean?
Well, and that, I mean,
got
even
me on
about
my knees. Like,
yeah, like, do I have to crawl across the floor to you?
Yeah.
Do I have to beg you to take me back? You
Also,
know, I don't
mean,
want to fade away. Like,
nobody knows you when you're down and out.
Yeah.
Tell the truth. Why does love have to be so sad? Like, you know?
Yeah, which is interesting too, because now George Harrison in response, like, I mean, he kind of wrote. What's funny is that like they were best friends, but George Harrison also wrote a song like "Simply Shady,"
Right?
You know what I mean, and stuff like that, where it was like pretty blatantly just like, "Hey, bro, like you're my best friend, but like also you're kind of like playing a weird game here."
Yeah.
But the thing is that George Harrison was cheating on Patty Boyd anyway. Like he was.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like,
of course,
it's free love. It's the the late '60s, early '70s. Everyone's just kind of like doing their thing. So.
But yeah, I mean, also like the Strat sound, I don't think Clapton's ever sounded like, better on here.
Yeah,
like,
that's the best Strat sound I hear.
And it's like
Clapton.
out of tune and wonderful at some points and like sloppy, but like in its own wonderful way.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's definitely got a vibe. Like when this record came out too, this record bombed. Like this record did not do well for Clapton.
No. So think about that though. Think about the toll that it takes on the man, where it's like, here he is, he's love stricken. He writes this album that he is like, this is a manifestation of like everything this is everything coming together for me. And not only does the album fall flat on its face in terms of its reception, but also the woman that he wrote this thing for rejects him. So it's just, that's the perfect storm for him, where he's just like, yup, and he just falls off the wagon.
Right.
Hard. I mean, Eric Clapton and Patty Boyd would eventually end up finding each other anyway and getting married and stuff. But the thing was, he was in the middle of it's like he finally gets her.
Right. And then he doesn't even want it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing that gets you about it, where you're just like, dude, what? But again, I mean, that speaks to, like maybe mental health and like what's a taboo thing and what's not, especially like around that time period, and like what would people think, so it's like there's so much more to it than just basically like, oh, he likes this girl and she's like, no, and then he kind of was like, oh, I'm real sad.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, a lot going on, and I think that tragedy,
even like
would
the
come
rejection from his own mother and all that,
Right,
it's like it all plays like heavy into this like
absolutely
whole myth, and then like this whole album comes out, and
Yeah.
it's like it's got a lot of lore to it. There's a lot of like a lot of feeling in this.
Yeah, but
it's a great classic rock album too. Like every song is like
I'll say this,
so classic.
I had a one of my older cars. Luke will remember it. I had an old like BMW 325i, and in the back I had like the
so
6.
Scary.
Oh yeah, it was a scary car. But anyway, in the back of it there was like a 6 CD changer, and I'll tell you what, the one album that never left was that one.
Yeah.
That album, that CD was always in there. I'd switch out all other CDs and like put different stuff. CDs, guys, look them up. They're like, they were a thing. I'd swap them out. Here we are talking about vinyl, and then I'm like, yeah, CDs. You ever heard of them?
CDs were our era, everybody.
They were our
Actually,
era, yeah.
if we had an era, it'd probably be we were late CDs,
early MP3s.
We were definitely on the MP3 thing.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that album like never left, and I think it was because it is, man. It's such a beautiful album, and yeah, I mean the guitars are out of tune. I remember I was talking to
our buddy Jeff May, who's on the last episode. Always is like, ugh, I hate that record.
Yeah.
The guitars are out of tune.
Yeah, but even shout out to Dan over at Mystic Disc. I remember talking to him, and he's just like, God, they were just all doped up, and they didn't even remember to tune their guitars. You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, that's true. But also,
like that makes an aesthetic.
Yeah, and I kind of dig that.
Yeah, if you ever like
not
watch,
the dope part, but
the pain is art kind of thing. There's also some Charlie Parker sides that I learned about from Ken Burns Jazz.
Yeah,
where like when Charlie Parker went out west, he got like really strung out on heroin, and he was an alcoholic. And he has this one session where he goes in and he plays, and they have to hold him up because he's so drunk. And he's like he plays this ballad, man. and it's like the most like heartbreaking, tender thing you've ever heard in your life because it's so real.
Yeah.
And it's got, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh my God, you know, it's got that like embarrassing story behind it, but also like the heartbreak is such powerful art, you know, at the same time. And
it's like dying it's like dying for your art. You like die into it.
Right. And we're not saying that like that's like something to look forward to, and like, you know what I mean? It's not something to aspire to be, you know, like a drug addict. We're not saying that. But what we are saying though is that, you know, these people did have these problems. They did have these kind of
and we can't rule out the human issue. You know, in other words, we can look at music in a very stale way that's just kind of like, this is how I felt about this album.
Right.
But it's like, we know, you know, that's not the case. Like, there's so many other things contributing, especially when the outlet is art. Like
right.
Any sort of an art form, you know, like, and yeah, I don't know. That album does it for me.
And totally for at least for me and Mike, I mean, like I like the Unplugged album. You know, I'll put that on maybe once in a while because you know the versions are cool. But like for me, you know, I'm not really into like Clapton's. I'm gonna quote unquote yacht rock him. Dad rock, contemporary rock.
Yeah, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's like pop rock.
There's nothing wrong with it, and he's very successful at it. But like for me and Mike, who are mostly, we are the rock listener. This is probably where we would like
kind of draw the line.
Yeah, as Aerosmith would say, you know.
yeah, and I mean, but the thing is that like these sorts of tragedies and upsets, like I mean, that would kind of follow like his whole life. And like I just wanted to speak to something real quick, which was kind of like, I mean, okay, Tears in Heaven, right? We look at that song. Now we're skipping way ahead, but like let's just kind of umbrella in basically 461 Ocean Boulevard up to present day, right? Because I kind of lump all that stuff in together.
Right.
Like that's for me, that's you have these defining albums and moments in Clapton's career, and then you have solo Clapton, which is kind of just like meh, you know.
I mean, but let's talk too. Let's also be fair. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
It's myth for me and you, but people love the album Slow Hand. I think that's 77.
Yeah.
That's a great comeback album for him.
Yeah, that's got some good cuts. Like,
he went on to do
Cocaine. He went on to do...
yeah, he definitely went on to do some cocaine.
Dude, that documentary, My Life in 12 Bars, there's like a scene where he does like a bump off of like a knife, and you're like, oh my God. And he's just very much just hot and sweaty and just like, you can see he's all strung out.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, no, there are some good cuts. But for me, like Tears in Heaven was always a song that like I looked at like, okay, it's very sad. So for those of you who don't know, Tears in Heaven, the influence behind that album is basically that like, okay, so like when he's with Patty Boyd, he ends up finding another love interest who is like, I think was like a model or something like that. I can't remember. I think it was like an Italian model or something. Anyway, long story short, they have a child together. And, you know, it's this kind of like revelatory experience for Clapton where he's just like, you know, I got to clean up my act. Like I have a son now and I have to do all that stuff. Long story short, I think like 2 or 3 years later, the mother is visiting like a friend or a family member or something in like a high rise in New York City. Windows open, kid falls out of the window, and it's like on the 52nd floor or something
incredibly
crazy,
tragic.
you know, and his son dies. You know, and what's crazy is like, it's interesting how music has this weird thing where like for me, Tears in Heaven was always kind of like this schmaltzy song. And I don't mean it disrespect because it's about his dead son. So like, I'm not trying to like be that guy, but for me, I was like, I'm not really into this.
Right.
But like now that I have a child,
it hits you a little different.
I listened to it and I was like, you know, like it, dude, when I was watching the documentary, when it got to that part in the documentary, that was really hard for me to get through.
Right.
Because I'm just like, oh my God. Like,
so are you saying that you might relate to him more, that you have become like a father, and like now that you were into like his more more like you know, raunchy kind of like, you know, heavier stuff, and now you're like, oh, I kind of like can relate to his like contemporary adult rock.
That's like, I listen, you know, that song Cats in the Cradle, like you hear that song, like, I mean, okay, it's kind of like become like a meme of itself, you know what I mean, or whatever. But like after you have a child, you're like, especially like a son, you know, because there's this kind of like bonding thing between father and son. It's like this whole thing, you know, like every son, every father, not every father, but like, you know, it's always like the father-son dynamic, whatever. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that like yeah, man, I heard Tears in Heaven, and like I saw that part in the documentary, and it like it kind of like tore me up, man. It was really really hard to watch because like I love my son so much, and like to think about like Eric Clapton, who like was going through all this stuff, you know, he had all these issues and everything, and like here's his son who is like this blessing for him to like clean up his act, and then the son dies. So you're like, it's such a heartbreaking thing, you know, and it's sad that like that sort of like loss and tragedy and rejection and all that stuff would just kind of like follow him around his whole life until, I mean, obviously now where he's got like, you know, Ferrari building him like a custom car, things are a little bit different for him in his life, I think. But it took a lot to get there, I think, for him.
And,
you know?
You know, on the positive, like, you know, on the up and up too, like Clapton made like a great charity, I think, where he like
oh yeah,
I know he sells a lot of guitars, and I think it goes to people with, I think, addiction. I think he does.
Yeah, he from what I had
does like
seen,
the Crossroad Festival goes to that too. I think, right?
Yeah, and I think the big thing was like because I mean it's on, you can find it on YouTube when you go down like a YouTube rabbit hole, which basically just kind of like, oh, Eric Clapton's guitar auction collection or whatever.
Right. He sold like most of his guitars to
almost
open up
everything. Yeah, just for the sake of opening up a rehabilitation center and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, Clapton, he's done some good with his money because I think that he definitely he was in the clutches of addiction. So I think that he's made some pretty good contributions to that front, which is dealing with addictions and stuff. And you know, I mean, that's
well, you know, and that's where we're gonna kind of leave it for Clapton for today. But
yeah, and
we're gonna move on to our other segment, I think. What have you been listening to?
What have you been listening to, Luke? Why don't you tell us?
What have I been listening to? Last night I went on a crazy zombies kick. I listened to a lot of zombies.
Oh yeah.
Yes. My girlfriend Chelsea has an original pressing of the first album, like the U.S. copy, the Zombies. She's not there, so I put that on, and it's in glorious mono, and it's super clean, and it was one of my white whale records, you know, to find, and she's got a copy of it, so I get to spin it, and I really enjoy it. So I spun that. I spun Odyssey and Oracle yesterday. I spun the Zombies' last like unreleased album, Rest in Peace. I went on a whole kick. And, you know, I love the Zombies. Zombies are one of my favorite bands. I've been spinning that. What else have I been listening to? Obviously, I listen to a lot of Eric Clapton. We did that episode on prog, so I was still kind of on that Floyd kick. But I listened to some earlier Floyd. I listened to like See Emily Play, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
But, yeah, you know.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know, man. I've been lazy listening lately.
You've been lazy listening? What's some lazy listening?
Lazy listening is just kind of like putting on like Grateful Dead Europe 72 and just like letting it
deadhead
roll.
Over here.
Just deadheading it. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, you know, I've been pretty busy, so you know, sometimes it's nice to just like throw something on that I don't really have to pay attention to, but to have like some decent music in the background. I did kind of go down like the 90s hip hop rap rabbit hole the other night where I listened.
I've kind of been on that kick too.
Yeah, man. Where I listened to some Mobb Deep. The album Hell on Earth is a really great fun album. Listen for me. Very much like because that came out in 1996, and then like I also did Wu-Tang Forever, which I believe was 97. These albums were really important for me in a way because I had a cousin, one of my older cousins, Jimmy, shout out to Jimmy, who was very much into this music. And I actually distinctly remember the first time I ever went to Greece was in 1997. And that was around the time that Wu-Tang Forever came out. And like my cousin having that album and me just being like, because it was, for me, it was like kind of like the forbidden fruit, right? Because it was
they
so
said bad words.
It was so explicit. It was so very much like, you know, edgy in that way. Along with Mobb Deep's Hell on Earth, which came out in 96, but obviously that was in the collection as well. So yeah, it's like, I don't know. The Wu-Tang Forever album is just like, it's so good. And I don't know. I love them as a group. I love RZA as a producer,
right?
You know, and then just some kind of like Bob Marley and the Wailers. I listen to some Marvin Gaye.
I listened. You know what else I listened to this week? I listened to Bringing It All Back Home, the Bob Dylan record.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, guys, I love that record so much. Maggie's Farm's on there. Bob Dylan's 115th Dream is like one of my favorites. Like Mr. Tambourine Man on the B side. One of the greatest records, and I know I love that record, but I put it on the other day and I got to listen to it in like headphones, and it really was like quite an experience. I really enjoyed that one too.
Yeah.
So yeah, man.
Yeah, man. So that's been about it.
I've also kind of been doing some lazy listening, maybe some like more comforty food, where I'm not like trying to listen to anything crazy.
Yeah, getting deep into anything. Yeah. I just try, that's what I've been doing, man. Just trying to keep the mood light, because I work second shift, so like when I get up in the morning and stuff, it's just nice to just throw on like some Bob Marley and like make some breakfast and kind of like do the morning thing. You know what I mean? Just to get a good vibe going, man.
You know what
just
else I listened to the other day? I listened to Concert for Bangladesh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I listened to like a lot of it. And Clapton plays on that too. Everybody should listen to Beware of Darkness. I think it's the best cut on that whole record.
Yeah.
Leon Russell takes a verse on it with George, and Clapton's on it. And cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to listen to some like Clapton and some of his darkest days, is the Concert for Bangladesh too, because that's like right all that period.
Yeah.
Like we're talking right around I think that's 72, 71, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think that during that one of the because I think that was a run of shows, wasn't it? I mean, we have the one recorded Concert for Bangladesh, but I think it was kind of like there was like a mini tour that happened. They played a couple of things.
I'm not super sure, to be honest with you.
Either way, I had heard a thing where it was like, during the Concert for Bangladesh, that Clapton was so drunk that he like collapsed.
Oh my gosh.
And they like revived him, and then he finished the show. Like he actually ended up like playing out, finishing out the show or whatever. But yeah, that he was just so out of it that he like just he like fainted or passed out or whatever, and they had to like kind of bring him back too.
Oh my gosh. No, I love Concert of Bangladesh. So you have Leon Russell playing Jumpin' Jack Flash on there. You got Billy Preston. And George Harrison playing Wah with like Badfingers, like most of the backing band, and you got Ringo and Klaus Vorman on bass.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Klaus.
So I mean, it's such a great record. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of sloppy at points, but it's so cool.
And
it's
that album, real quick. Oh, I think it's safe to say is that like that kind of gave way to the like the charity concert, like your Farm Aids and all that stuff.
We Are the World.
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, Concert for Bangladesh is kind of where that whole
so check that out too. Like
from.
George Harrison, that George Harrison doc is amazing.
Also, Ravi Shankar's set in the Concert for Bangladesh.
Oh yeah,
possibly my most favorite Ravi.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel so warm.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like that's the only way I can explain it. Like I listen to it and I just hear like
if you're into
Shankar's.
the sitar music. Yeah.
If that's
that record's pretty cool, man. You got a whole side of Bob.
Yeah.
And you got George backing him playing like cool slide parts and stuff.
And even I mean, if you want to talk about it, like think about the album cover for that. It shows like a starving child.
Yeah, it's a real powerful statement.
And that was something that we didn't talk about either. Was like the cover for Blind Faith, the original cover, which was a controversial cover too, where it depicted a underage girl.
Oh yeah,
like a topless underage girl holding a hood ornament
of like a car or something.
Yeah, like an old car. It's supposed to show like the childlike innocence versus like the industrial complex.
I mean, sure, you could go with that. I'm so used to why I didn't even think of that is I'm so used to seeing the cover, the US cover of them on it, and that was the one I was looking at when we were talking about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely forgot all about that. That's another cool, or not really cool, but interesting little like tidbit to look up is the original Blind Faith album cover that actually got banned in the US. It is rather graphic to some extent.
Yeah, I mean it definitely is. Yeah, it's explicit. But anyway, so I think that about wraps it up for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Also, we have a YouTube page up.
Yeah.
Check it out. You just search Get in the Garage. All the links are in our bio, like the Instagram bios and stuff like that.
Yep. I'm Julius Records on Instagram, so check that out.
I am E_M_T_1.
Whatever.
Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna get the change in that at one point. It's the weird Instagram move where like you change your thing. And
no, I never. I've changed it once.
I know.
My Instagram name used to be a Bright Eye Song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I named it after my cat. So
mine used to be Bearded Bearded Morrison.
I like
Maybe
that one
I'll change
better.
that one back. I'll change it back to that one. At least it's familiar, I suppose. Bearded Morrison. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Any questions, comments, suggestions, anything you want to hear us talk about, obviously, you can always hit us up on all social media platforms as well as gitgpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Support your local record stores.
Support your local record stores, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.